Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We hope this will be a really warm and provocative conversation. We are delighted at the mix of IEC friends that we've gathered here today. One of the joys of this for us is that we've spoken to many of you one-on-one, and we love the opportunity to bring you together. I know that some of you already know each other, but for us to be able to broaden your network and your community in joining with us is terrific. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. One, to let you know we are recording this session and we will send you the recording afterwards, especially because some of you may have to leave a little bit early and some people are joining a little bit late. In order to save as much time for a conversation as possible and to make this not feel like a conference call, we're not going to do introductions up front. We sent everyone very brief bios on all the participants, and feel free to glance at those. We also strongly encourage you that when you do participate with either the chat or when you ask a question or make a comment, to just introduce yourself and remind folks who you are so they can put a face to the name. While John and Caren are setting up the film and kind of teeing that up, and while we're watching the trailer, we're going to ask you to rely on the chat function to communicate with everyone or with any of us directly. And because we've tested this multiple ways and it's so important, we believe, for you to experience this film in the highest fidelity possible, we decided that the best way to do that is for you to watch the trailer directly on your device. And so in the email that you received is a link to that trailer. John will tell you when to click on it. We will also put the link in the chat box at the appropriate time. Just put yourself on mute in Zoom, go watch the trailer. It only takes 2-3 minutes, and then come back to the Zoom for the conversation. And John and Caren will lead that conversation, but we really encourage you to please engage and share yourself. We will be tracking any questions or comments that you put in the chat box if you want to tee things up that way, but you should also feel free to raise your hand or just to speak up. This is a small enough group and we designed it that way so that the conversation could flow. So with that, let me introduce our MC for the night. His name is Gung Do, and we are really privileged to have him be a founding member of IEC's board. Gung is also the new founder and chairman of a biotech firm called M6P, but previously was global strategy lead for Samsung. So he brings pretty heavy duty credentials, not only in the business world, but in this world of intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I'm gonna let him speak to that, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out, in case you didn't catch it already, that he is an enophile. And he is the one that we have to thank for all of the gorgeous wine that went out, and that I hope will lubricate the conversation. So with that, let me turn it to Gung.
Thank you, Mai, and thank you for everyone for joining us tonight. And it's great to see you here. Just one more word about myself and why we're here. I am the parent, my wife and I are parents of a 19-year-old son who is on the spectrum, right? He was diagnosed when he was 2, and we have been on this journey ever since. So along the way, I've worked with some people here, helped start Autism Speaks way back when, started different foundations and schools to help the autism community. And we will be moving to Miami in exactly 1 month so that our son can start at Florida International University in the fall. So we've been on this journey along the way. And given my healthcare background and so forth, I've always felt that healthcare needs were underappreciated, underlooked after in the IDD community, right? And so when Mai came with the idea for IEC, I said, of course, I'll help, right? And that's why I'm really excited on what we're trying to do at IEC, right? So to kind of get us started tonight, I would like everyone to get out your bottle. And if you haven't done so, open it. Right? And pour into your first glass just a little bit. up that much. And then what I would like for you to do, screw back the cap. Screw it. And shake the bottle very, very vigorously. Right? And then release, open the bottle. Right? And what you see at the very top there, the foam is nitrogen that is being released and it's coming out of solution. Now screw the cap back on. Do it one more time. And now this is ready to be served. So pour this into your other glass, a larger portion this time. Right? And if you like to taste wines, take a little bit of the taste of the first one and then taste the second one. And I think you'll be surprised of just how much of a difference just that little activity makes. So this wine, a word about this wine, this is made by my favorite winemaker. This is made in McLaren Vale in Australia. This is a 100% Shiraz wine. This was the #2 wine in the world a few years back. It's rated by Robert Parker and the team there. Right? And so it's called the Carnival of Love, made by my favorite winemaker. So I won't say, I could go on for about this wine for hours, which I won't. So let me turn now to our guest, our main feature for tonight. So I got to know John and Caren, well, it must be close to 5 years now. So through a friend who's also on this call, Steve Keitzman and I do a lot of work together. So one day Steve came to me and said, you know, there are these 2 Pulitzer Prize winning journalists who would love to come and see you, right? And they just want to talk to you, ask for your help and so forth. I said, really? What do I have to contribute to a duo like this? But I said, okay, fine, I'll meet with them. So we had a lovely lunch whereby they told me about their book and the project that they were working on. And by the time of that lunch, I said, I've signed up, right? And today they're going to reveal to us what that project is about. And it's been a labor of love for them for quite some time now. So I have the great honor and pleasure of introducing John Donvan, and Caren Zucker, right, to the groups. And I'll let them introduce themselves. So John, Caren, over to you.
Thank you.
John, you're on mute.
I know, that's because I'm a trained broadcast professional. That's why I started talking before flipping the switch. So thanks, Kong, very much for that introduction and leaving it to Caren and me to explain who we are. And I just mentioned broadcast professional. Caren and I worked for many, many years at ABC News, where I was a correspondent on camera, and Caren was the real brains behind the scene as a producer. We were working together on all kinds of stories, all kinds of things. And we often worked together, not always exclusively with one another, but often. And then in the late 90s, Caren's then 2 or 3 year old son, Mickey, you can clarify for me. Actually, I'll let you pick up the story, Caren. Why don't you take how we made this pivot to this other topic?
So when Mickey was actually 2.5, so you got that. He was diagnosed with autism, and I thought I should go to the smartest, most articulate storyteller I knew to help me get the word out about autism. And John agreed to work with me, and that's about 25 years ago. So we've been telling stories about autism and trying to reach the public in a way it really wasn't. We did the first story ever done about autism on a network newscast, Nightline, in 2001. And we kept reporting on autism as we did some other work as well. But it was my passion, and somehow I got John to stay on board for all these years. And then at some point we decided, well, we had to do something that was more everlasting than these short stories or half-hour shows that we were doing, and decided to do a book on the history of autism. And once that was finished, personally, I felt that the book was incredibly well received. It was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, not winner. But we got great reviews, but we felt we still hadn't hit the population of people that we really wanted to touch, which are the people that don't know that much about autism, and the people that aren't interested and aren't invested and don't care. And so this film was taking the book to the next level, which was telling the important stories of what the book needed to say, but trying to really get people outside of the community to care and become invested and to realize that they have a very, very important role in the lives of people who have autism. And without their understanding and compassion, those people on the spectrum do not live as rich a life. So we're out to get everybody else out there.
And I'll say one thing that Caren has commented on a number of times that we've been working together. She said that she has seen time and again parents who have a child who has needs, sets out to help the kid get those needs met in the world, but then they go beyond that and they want to help other people in the community. And that, for example, lawyers go into autism law, and doctors go in, and psychologists. And my mother-in-law, who lives in Israel, was a musician, and her son was diagnosed in 1969, and she went back to school and got a degree in education. And Caren said that she wanted her contribution to be the thing that she knew how to do, which was journalism and storytelling and being able to touch people's hearts and open their minds. And
that's what I'm going to interrupt. Sorry, which is what I do sometimes. And that's what IEC is doing now. Is they're taking the talent and the brains of and the importance of the health care industry and trying to change something that's probably more important than anything that we're talking about. Sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting. When the first conversation we had with we were in Mississippi at a film festival, caught in a huge thunderstorm in a convertible, and the rain was pounding down and we couldn't see anything, and we were on phones that were coming in and out, and we didn't really know what Maya was going to talk to us about, and she told us what IEC was, and then we lost the signal, and huge storm, fog closed in and everything else. And Caren, who was driving, because she doesn't let me drive, Caren, who was driving, said, this is so important. I want to get this connection back. This is what they're doing is so important. And she was saying that as a mother. So we're on board. We're really big believers. So what are we going to show you? We're going to show you the thing that our contribution to changing the world, doing it the way we know how to do it, which is tell a story. And we took the book, and we took parts of the book, which was all history, and we took the best part of the best story we had from the history, and we used that to talk also about the present. So I think I should tell you this ahead of time, that we were able to find the first person ever diagnosed with autism. He's still alive. He's an elderly man who lives in Mississippi. And we wanted to find out how his life had turned out. Like what happened there? Who was he? How did he become that child who was identified first? And what happened to the rest of his life? And that's what we did in the book with the history. In the film, we decided to take that story and see what it told us about the present and issues that people have today. So we can go now to that clip. And so, as we mentioned, does everybody know where the chat box is on the screen? Okay, if you move your cursor around, it'll be revealed down on the bottom. And I'm going to put a link in there now. And what I want to ask you to do is everybody's muted already, which is good. If you're not, to mute your microphone, click on the link, watch the trailer, and we'll all come back here in 2.5 minutes and we'll talk about what that trailer is about. So does anybody need more time? I'll wait for a raise of a hand, but this is a very sophisticated group. Okay, all right. So count to 5, we'll see you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I've always known Don. I don't remember not knowing Don.
I think, can you raise your hand if you're done watching? It's everybody. Okay, so we're good. That worked. That was an experiment. That's never happened on a Zoom call before in history. So congratulations to all of us. So you see what Donald's triplets life was like and how his life turned out. We had no idea when we first reached out to him, which was now back in 2007, that's what we would find. But Caren, you can share kind of the first indication that we got when we reached out in 2007 that his life had turned out pretty well in a community that was like the perfect example of how you want a community to respond to somebody with autism.
We had tracked him down, and that took a little bit of work to do. But when we finally found him, we decided that we weren't going to just show up on his doorstep, that we wanted permission to enter his life, because he'd gone, no one he'd never been public before. And we contacted his brother and friends of the family. And the first thing they said to us was, well, we'll introduce you to Donald, but if you mess with him in any way, we will track you down and we will get you. And they were really serious about that. They were incredibly protective of Donald. And so from moment one, we knew we were walking into a very special place, and a place that wasn't like any other community we've ever seen before.
And Donald, we made the choice in the film to focus on his community as almost like a character in the film. Part of the reason is because they were an important part of his life, and also Donald, we learned, is not very chatty. He does not really discourse on his thoughts or his feelings or anything like that. But as his friend said, he's up to speed on everything. He knows what's going on around him. In fact, there was a story that we told in the book. It's unfortunately not in the movie. We couldn't get it in. But in addition to telling like what his early childhood was like, and in fact, he was put in an institution when he was 3 years old. So could have turned out really, really differently had his parents not, decided that was a wrong thing to do, and they reversed that and they went and got him help. But there was a story that really kind of reflected the depth of Don, and it's a story that everybody in town told us. They talk about it to this day, about a time everybody would say to us, that Donald can count bricks in a building just by looking at it.
You heard the brick story. People would want to know if we heard the brick story. And
yeah,
what was the brick story? And
so the story is that in around 1951, Donald was in high school, and he stepped out of the school building one day, and he was surrounded by a group of boys who were sort of, pushing him a little bit, saying, "Hey, Don, you're really smart and you're really good with numbers. Why don't you tell us how many bricks are in the school building right there?" And the story goes that Don heard them say that, and he looked over his shoulder, and then he looked back at the boys, and he threw out the number, and they were flabbergasted, and their jaws dropped, and they ran off, and they told all their friends, and their friends told their friends, and then the next generation heard the story, and the next generation. To this day, the amazing feat of Donald Triplett, that his mind is so good that he can look at a building and in a second tell you how many bricks are in that story. And we just heard that from everybody everywhere.
So we've become close to the family over the years, the book and then the film, and we know Donald really well at this stage in his life. And, I said to him one day, Donald, how did you do that? How did you figure out how many bricks there were in the wall? And he looked at me and he said, "I didn't. I made it up." And I said, "Well, why did you do that?" And he said, "I wanted the boys to like me." And that just tells you so much about people with autism, so much that people outside of the community don't know, but people inside of the community do know.
So what we wanted to do with the film is we want to reach that outside of the community. That's why we have this idea of ticket plus one. We want to go to autism communities and say, take a friend, whether you are on the spectrum, whether you have a family member on the spectrum, grandchild, brother,
Educator,
educator,
therapist.
yeah, somebody who's in the field. These are the people I work with, to say, I want you to get what this is about. So come to this movie. It's interesting. There's an interesting history. There's a score by Wynton Marsalis, and that they'll kind of get it. And what we want them to get is that Donald, as happy as his story is not typical. That he had the ideal situation, small town, the fact that his parents were really, really highly educated. His father went to Yale Law School. His mother's family owned the bank. They had money, they had means, they had education. They were able to get him help. They were able to sort of assert themselves socially. You know, you don't pick on my son. You don't, or I think the kids got the message. You don't pick on Donald Triplett. They got to know him as a kid and as a friend. That's a really ideal situation. And in the film, what we wanted to do is to show what we refer to people outside the community as the autism civilians, the ones who aren't really in the world, in the field, who don't understand that they do have a role. We want them to see this movie and understand all kinds of issues, like you saw in the trailer. Our friend Amy Gravino, who was really bullied as a kid. So for people who are more capable of independence and being able to go to school and go to jobs, being bullied is an enormous problem. But the other part of the experience for people who are far more challenged, who don't have language, who are probably not going to be able to hold a job or will have great challenges holding a job, that they have different kinds of issues as well. That's where the law enforcement scene comes in. We want to show this movie to police departments, not to make them feel bad, to make them say, here's what you need to do. It's understandable that you would not understand that if somebody doesn't answer your questions, won't make eye contact, won't answer, tries to run away when you apprehend them, we understand that that's gonna set off your instincts that there's something wrong there. But if you understand what autism is about, that won't happen. And we want to have employers understand that they need to go more than halfway if they want to, as many employers say, they want to support people on the spectrum, and they'll be glad that they did, but that they need to go more than halfway, that there are things that they need to know. And we just, at the very basic level of just friendship, we have a whole section in the movie about just being friends with a person on the spectrum. And then there's a section about what is autism? What is this? What are we talking about? What does it look like? And so Caren's son, Mickey, and Caren's relationship with Mickey is a thread of the film as well. As Caren has puzzled out how to be a parent to a now lovely guy, adult male, adult man, Mickey McGinnis, who is featured heavily in the film. We wanted to explore an issue that many people in the autism community told us they didn't know until they heard about the movie, which is the racial bias in diagnosis. That if you're Black or Latino and you're a child on the spectrum, you have a much more difficult time getting a diagnosis. Not to mention, depending on your community, also just getting services. We wanted to explore that also. So the film really manages to tie all of these stories together in a way where it just flows as a kind of a yarn, almost with a sense of a plot. In the beginning, Caren sets out to introduce Mickey to Donald. At the end of the movie, they meet, and kind of magical thing happens when they meet. And our idea is to show this to the civilians out there and to get them on board. So as Caren said, one of the reasons she so appreciates what IEC is doing is that she has the experience of.
Well, I can tell.
Sure. Yeah, I've been talking too long. You didn't interrupt me. That wasn't.
Letting you go for a little while. Really, it's the IEC connection is so huge because the underlying story in our story is that too many people in society just don't get what autism is. They don't get the breadth of it, and they don't get the depth of it, and they don't understand people with autism. And that's a huge problem in the medical world. And this, our film and what IEC is doing totally intersects, because it's about making the important people in society understand and care and learn about what autism is. My son is 27 now, and about a handful of years ago, he's semi-independent, and he lives in Arizona at a place where he's semi-independent and has support, but also can come and go as he pleases, which is really scary for me. But I've always wanted him to have a life. And one day on his way to go to a class, which was part of his program, he walked into the local hospital because he just decided that's what he wanted to do. And he decided to head towards surgery, and as a security guard started to chase after him. So instead of stopping, Mickey got scared and ran away. And I cringe at the thought, if he was a person of color, what would have happened to him. And thank God that this guy just kept running until he took him down, and brought him to, he did not tackle him, but he stopped him and took him to one of the doctors there. And very long story short, I ended up being on the phone with, through the program that Mickey was at, I got on the phone with the doctor, and the doctor literally said to me, well, he's not on drugs or anything, but he sounds like he is. He's very agitated, and Mickey was having an anxiety attack, and which is an autism anxiety attack, presents is much differently than how we do, right? Because our guys just get, it's a huge meltdown. And the doctor, I kept telling the doctor, well, my son has autism, so he's okay. He's not on drugs. He's, this is because he's nervous and anxious because he's getting in trouble for being somewhere he shouldn't. And the doctor kept letting me know that he wasn't on drugs, and that we would hold him there until somebody got to him, as if, and I kept trying to tell him, I know he's not on drugs. He has autism. But that's how it was presenting for this doctor, who really didn't know very much about autism. And that could happen anywhere, anytime. And John has a story as well that we heard from someone in the medical community. But the fact is that the medical community needs to know a lot more than they know. And they need to learn how and begin to understand how to communicate with people who are different. And not, do you want to tell them the story about?
Yeah, Caren and I, 5 years ago when our book came out, we toured, did a lot of talks around the country, different groups, and we were in Rochester, New York, and it was an autism group, and somebody had brought along a +1. He brought along his friend who was an ER doctor who didn't know very much about autism. And we did our talk, and at the end, Q&A section, he stood up and he said, I feel terrible for the thing I'm going to tell you. But in the ER, we've been instructed that when somebody comes with autism to go to a certain protocol, the protocol is knock them out, anesthetize immediately, so that you don't have to deal with autism, I guess. And
behaviors.
He began to tear up and said, I'm hearing this talk tonight, and I'm knowing what's been done, and I've done it. I'm never going to do it again. But nobody knows what to do or how to handle it, and it's a terrible protocol, because the one thing I can't do is ask that patient what's the problem, because he's not there, and I have zero kind of communication. So that was a really powerful example. First of all, in a way, we were very touched that our book talk got him to think about that, but it was really quite upsetting. And another thing that comes out of the story that we got to tell about Donald's pretty old. Donald's 87, and he was born in 33. He's coming up on 88, and we don't know very much about geriatric autism. Donald may be the oldest person we know how his autism. We know his whole lifespan now. He was there at the very beginning. He was case 1, and he's still there now. I had a conversation with my mother-in-law, who I mentioned before gave up her music career and got a degree in education in Israel. But she not only did that, she started the first autism organization in Israel in 1971 with some other families. She founded schools with things that people in this group have done, founded schools, founded residential communities, built them up. And her son is now about 54 years old. He's very, very challenged. No language, needs 24-hour supervision. Would really probably not feed himself if left to his own devices. At the same time, he can play the piano and he can paint unbelievable pictures. And I said a really dumb thing to her during a time when she was visiting here. I said, well, you know, you've built the school, you've built the residential community, you've got staff, you've got people trained, you've got financing from the Israeli government. You must finally feel, Edna, that now you can relax. And she said, are you kidding? She said, he's heading into old age. We don't know what happens in old age with autism. There are so many unknowns. I'm never going to be able to relax. I am going to die worried about what's going to happen to him, because we just haven't studied that end of the spectrum. So
and we don't know how to care for that end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, more, even more importantly, we need to do it today.
Yeah. So again, what we're hoping is that the film does not directly address Donald's geriatric status. It's just a fact that he's a man in his 80s, and you can, you know, we've seen him, even since knowing him in 2007, slow down a lot. In fact, he almost passed away back in 2016. We were, it got us spurred on doing the movie. Caren got a call from Donald's brother, who has been a friend of ours also. And he said, Donald's in the ICU. He's lived a good life. We're gathered around. We're saying our prayers. We're saying goodbye. And at that point, we hadn't shot a frame of the documentary. And we thought, well, we missed our opportunity. And then Donald goes and rallies and recovers completely. And then we said, okay, let's do this movie. Let's get it done, because we didn't want to miss that opportunity again. Also, there were other people in the film who were crusaders for change in the 60s and 70s who appear in the movie as well, and we didn't want to miss their stories. But that's what we're doing with the movie. The little bit of it that you got to see is our attempt, or it gives a flavor of our attempt to reach the civilians, to tell them this is a story that you should know, you'll want to know. You know, if you're that ER doctor, this movie is going to bring you a long way to getting it. If you're a cop and you've seen the footage and that body cam footage we had of that takedown, there's a lot of those incidents around being captured on body cam footage now. We can probably go online right now and find 3 or 4. And that's only because the body cams have been around for a few years. These cops don't want to have been the cop who was rough with somebody with a disability. They just don't get it, but they're anxious to get it. And we think the doctors will be anxious to get it, and the employers, but they may not know that they're anxious to get it. So that's our next goal. That's the thing we're working on next. Caren, if you want to maybe wrap up before we go to some questions.
Well, I'm not sure where you're leading me to.
Well, you want to send us off with the thought on our dream for this movie.
So obviously, you know, our dream is to get this out to as many eyeballs, as many people as we can to see it. And for people to know that they have a huge role in the lives of people with autism. And when you think about movies that have gotten out there in the past, from AIDS to The Color Purple, you can really change culture with a film. And we're hoping that this film will be one of those films, because it's not about one person. It's about the spectrum, and it's storytelling about all different shapes and sizes, and that autism comes in so many different forms. And that if we all just kind of pay attention, we can make a difference.
That's terrific, John, Caren, for that overview introduction. And it's obviously, it comes across as a fabulous project of passion, right? Of trying to make a difference in the community here. Will you take comments, questions from the group?
We would love that.
Yes, please.
Right, so please, group, let's not be bashful here. If any comments, questions for John, please unmute yourself and chime in.
How are you going to market this? I mean, are you doing different shows, premieres in selective spots in the US or other places?
We're right in the middle of actually talking to 2 distributors that might do a joint premiere, and we'll know about that by the end of the month. Simultaneously, we're trying to do some self distribution with private screenings, so that we can start to cultivate different aspects that we were talking about, aspects of society, from the police department to corporations, you know, to the autism community. That's an easy sell, but beyond that. And so we're looking to get it out as broadly as we can, but also in its broadcast potential, but also to do get into communities, literally get into communities,
Yeah.
and share the film.
The broadcaster we're talking to has initials that sound very much like PBS, and we hope that happens, and for a national broadcast. And then, as Caren said, in the meantime, we really want to go to individual communities and have them gather around their community, bring +1, show the film,
Have conversations.
have conversations about it, talk about it. So to use it as a conversation starter, as an educator kind of thing. So, you know, we could imagine, you know, bringing it to police departments, bringing it to corporations, maybe in shorter form, maybe cut up into different kinds of pieces, but they're giving everybody always the option to watch the whole thing. The whole film is 1 hour and 40 minutes. So we're going to do that 2-track thing, is keep going with the broadcaster, which we think is going to happen, and also be bringing it at a community level to start conversations, to get like real texture, real people touching other people in terms of the issue. And we just love this idea. If we can, you know, go to, say, the autism organization of some state, have them sponsor a showing, encourage that +1 idea, and then we would come in, you know, virtually or in person, have conversations, maybe bring some of the people who are in the film to a panel discussion. And we would love to hear the questions that, again, the civilians might be asking, because they were dragged along to this movie by their friend, and they watch the movie and see what they want to say about it, kind of like that ER doctor did, who didn't know anything about the issue. So that's kind of our vision for the next, between now and this time next year.
John, it's Samantha Sheridan from IEC. Peter Bell has his hand raised. Peter, do you want to unmute and come in?
Sure. Can I just double check and make sure you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So great to see John and Caren and some other friendly faces. And kudos to you guys for getting your book and now your film to this point. And I'm just really proud of you guys. So my question has to do with how this film fits into the world dialogue that has evolved since you started. Before you started this, I should say, since you started this book and this film, we now know what the Me Too movement is, Black Lives Matter, you know, just the way the world works, and how we're so much more keenly aware of, you know, just underrepresented and marginalized populations. And I guess I'm more acutely aware and involved in a fight with NIMBYs. The organization that I represent has purchased a large tract of land that we want to develop. And all we really need to do is get 3 commissioners to approve the use of our facility within the current zoning and so forth. And yet we are in a fight for our lives kind of battle with neighbors who will say, we love what you guys do. We're 100% on board. We just don't want you to do it in our backyards.
Because of the traffic. They'll say because of the traffic.
Traffic, water, fire.
Yeah.
Commercial, you know, you name it. It's 126 acres. We're going to have 6 buildings versus 20 luxury homes that would have gone there otherwise. And, you know, they almost feel like they can get away with saying, we love what you do. We just don't want it to happen here. And, you know, I thought we were in a community that really appreciated what we did, and they value what we do. and they will go out of their way to make our clients feel welcome and so forth. But when you decide to put it literally nearby, they just freak out. So I'm just curious, I want to make it a bigger discussion. What has happened in this world with respect to these other movements that has either helped or gotten in the way of what you're trying to communicate in your film and in your book?
It's the perfect time for this film, actually. I mean, some of the stories that are in it, including the policing and the story about, the people of color are under or undiagnosed more than others. The topics are where we are right now with everything. And so we think that this is the best time to get into corporations and to get into neighborhoods and to get into backyards, to say, look at this spectrum, because that's what the film does. It says, look at the breadth of this spectrum. This is your neighbor, this is your cousin, this is your cousin's best friend once removed. We all know somebody, and this is who they are, and they're not so scary. This is part of your community, and you need to embrace them. And so we think that the timing of this film, given everything that's going on, especially what's going on with you, is even more important, because it makes the NIMBYism less scary, I think, if you actually, you spend the hour and a half or so with this film, and just, it's the difference between what's in someone's head, what they think autism is, and what reality is. And so this is reality. And, people with autism are, they're the best friends you can ever have, because they don't pretend to be who they aren't. And I think you see a lot of that in the film. And I think this is a great teacher, but not in a teaching sense.
I was about to say that the film does not preach at all, but it shows.
Right.
It shows. And at the end of the film, there's two little boys who they're now not such little boys, but they met as toddlers, and one of them has autism and the other doesn't, and they go to a school that mixes kids together, and they're like totally best friends. But in a certain incident that happened, it was the neurotypical kid who needed an emotional boost, and he got it from the other kid, from the kid on the spectrum, which completely turns sort of everything upside down. And the guy who runs the school was commenting on that and said, that's what these two boys are doing, is what happened in Donald's community. They just got to know each other, and to sort of appreciate each other, and not be scared of each other, and not to be seen as just so different. And
it can't be one time. It has to be over and over. I mean, that's part of what worked for Donald, is that the community was exposed to him all the time, and they got to know him and love him. And somebody with autism can't just just be a fleeting moment. We are the people, our children, my son is part of the community, and everybody needs to get used to him. And
I would offer to take John's interpretation of that incident in the film even further, to say that a world like what was created to make Donald feel safe is a better world for everyone who lived in that town.
Absolutely.
A school that is better for that child is better for every child in that school. A healthcare system that is better for the most vulnerable is a better healthcare system for everyone, because you are prepared, your antenna are awake, and you have the muscles.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the things that Danny, the director of this program that's in the film, said, and I agree with him, that these children who are in these included programs, who grow up as, they're toddlers, and from 2 to 5, all they know is that they're the same as each other. They grow up to be the ambassadors. They grow up to be the leaders that say, we're all in this together.
And an interesting thing, also to your point, Mai, is that school, it's in Phoenix, there's a line of parents of neurotypical children trying to get their kids into that school because the education is so sensitive to the individual needs of the kids, driven by the autism part of the population, that the neurotypical part of the population is benefiting completely. So I think,
Directly to your point, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't need to put Richard Park on the spot, but he's a primary care guru right here with us. I mean, he's been an innovator in that space. And Richard, I would just love your thoughts on, how you envision selling this to general primary care. It's like, hey, if you can do this, it doesn't take that much to learn how. You can really become the go-to practice, or the go-to solution for a lot of people.
So a little bit of background, I've started and founded a urgent care chain, so walk-in medical care called City MD here in New York. And, I think one of the benefits, more than financial, it's related, I guess, is what it does to the staff. And so what we had a parent walk into one of our Upper West Side locations and suggested, hey, can I bring my child in here who's autistic so that he can get comfortable with a doctor's office before he actually needs one? And so they came in and he ended up touring the space. So the next time he actually needed it, he felt comfortable. And what it did with the staff, the entire staff rallied around these children. Ended up, his schoolmates came and they kind of toured the space. I think it has profound effects on the staff. Everybody wants to do good. They want to serve kindness. They want to take care of patients. And it's a great reminder to not just the doctors, but to the entire staff, what it is to help people. And so you can, and I think it's if you need to make a financial argument, as many times the board needs to be reminded, it's great for morale. It's great for, it's great PR. Hate to make it that way, but sometimes you need to convince others that are not in the club, so to speak.
Hi, Pat. Our friend Pat, did you want to jump in? I know you had your hand raised. You're on mute, Pat. Can you unmute yourself?
I wanted to say
Thanks,
I
Richard.
love a couple of things. One is I love the idea of the +1, because anytime that we've done trainings, we tend to be getting those who are already on our side. And you're talking to the choir when the police were offered trainings. And it's a little disheartening because it's not who you want them to be there, certainly. But you really want somebody to bring a neighbor who is not really understanding. So that was one thing I think is just a brilliant idea on your part. And the other is you need strategies. All the empathy in the world isn't going to work without strategies. And there are really concrete strategies that people can use and understand processing issues, understand that somebody's not, they're anxious, they're not going to be able to answer all the things that you were trying to explain, Caren, to that ER doc. And if you give them a little bit of knowledge like that, not necessarily in the film, and a handout and something on the website or whatever, that's going to go a long way. And nobody's really understand, or we didn't mention here, about all of the undiagnosed women that we're seeing so many of. So I just was throwing that in. I was there when you were first promoting the book at one of the meetings where Caren London was, introducing you. So I feel very excited to be here tonight.
Wow. Thank you.
Hey, I think my only job as MC is to try to keep us mindful of the time. I'm being mindful of the time, right? So if we're coming up on the hour, if you have to drop off, please feel free to drop off. But Caren, John, and many of us want to continue this conversation. We're just going to continue on the conversation for as long as people want to have the conversation. So please, if you have to drop off, please feel free to do so. I know Monica has a comment. Before I go to Monica, I just want to recap some of the points that have been made in the chat. I guess two things I want to point to. Bo, there's been a lot of conversations in the chat about your app, the things you've done around police and so forth, right? So if you can share what you have done around that, right? So we'll go to that first. Second is there's a number of comments here about Special Olympics, and the next, and Special Olympics, as many in the call knows, has a fabulous, probably the best connection to law enforcement there is out there. And the next meeting is actually going to be in Orlando, right? So the idea is, why not try to get the movie screened at the next Special Olympics International meeting in Orlando? So there's a bunch of stuff around that. So if we can cover those 2 points first, and then Monica, I promise we'll come back to you if that's okay. All right, so Bo, could you tell us a little about what you've done, and then if you can share a link or something to that?
Okay, I'm going to cover Special Olympics. Holly has the app, not me. So
Oh, okay.
we can cover that.
I've been answering on his thing.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Where is Bo? Can you raise wave or something? Oh, I see now.
So
Okay, thank you.
everybody put your view into gallery view. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Is there's a view, go to gallery view. That way you see the whole group of everybody.
So with Special Olympics, yeah, we are very strong with law enforcement. What I do want to let you know is that the next World Conference of Law Enforcement that supports us, with representatives coming from states, provinces, different countries, is actually in Dallas next year. Orlando is the USA Games, another great opportunity. There might be a lot going on there, but another great opportunity. And Mai is pretty plugged in now with Alicia, and certainly, you know, we have a lot of friends of Alicia's on this call right now. So I do think that is a good opportunity. I do want to make sure that you all understand that within Special Olympics, although the primary group of people are those intellectual disabilities, you know, based on more of the IQ piece, we have a monstrous influx of people with autism. We have a huge school program in the United States that's federally funded, along with private funds, where we're making big inroads. And just as one example, in 95% of our high schools in Connecticut, we have unified teams of kids with and without disabilities on the same teams, part of the athletic programs of all of those schools, who compete against each other in 5 different sports during the course of the year. And that's just one state. So just to give you an example of our reach, and, you know, based on the trailer and what I've heard, you know, this is a population that we really need to focus on and understand. And I think there are some elements here that could really, as far as partnership goes, where we could maybe amplify what you're trying to do with this particular awesome film.
Wow, thank you.
Right.
And now Holly will talk. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to obviously get too in depth in this, but I, as a parent of a son on the autism spectrum, and we've been through the same thing with police, and he will not drive anymore, and it's a very emotional thing. So as a nurse and as a mother, I just developed my own app, which was, designed for me to care plan at home and be able to follow him throughout his life. But we're working with a lot of people in Connecticut, and many of whom are Special Olympics athletes. And when we met with the law enforcement torch run, they said, oh my gosh, this describes everything, because we didn't make an app that was, a healthcare app. We made an app so that whoever is looking at this is going to understand everything about this child, how you deal with them in a situation. So yes, we put on a feature, how to de-escalate if a police pulls this child over. Our son happened to be walking, so it was even more difficult. How to approach and
right. So Afterwards, maybe Jill and Bo, if you can share with Sam some of the specifics around the app and the program, we'll follow it up and we'll get it out to everybody if that's okay with you guys.
Wonderful.
Right. And Monica, I know you've been very patiently waiting, so can I turn to you next?
I actually feel a little guilty because it's a little, the thread is a little lost,
Monica,
but
before you
yeah.
talk, can I self-disclose that Monica is our family's autism coach and saved our lives?
That's very flattering, but I think there's a few threads that I'm sort of thinking about as I'm listening to this. One of them is that I'm always loath to appeal to anybody's altruism in these kinds of situations, that, you know, you're doing a good thing, it makes people feel good. What I actually like to do is appeal to people's own internal motivations. Why are you in the business you're in? Why are you, doing what you're doing? And so what I think about often is, in the case of the ER doc, and even actually this has had resonance with police officers that I've worked with, though frankly, the message comes best when police officers speak to police officers. And they deliver the message to each other as ambassadors, is say, you know, why did you get into this? And did you get into this business, whatever you're in, to basically be a form of a dictator? Or are you in this because you're actually interested in being a critical problem solver and in really understanding the human condition, or whatever, in the case of medicine, what's really affecting your patient? And when you start thinking of can't and not won't as the guiding principle in any profession, you start thinking this person is just struggling with someone and I can turn it into a can't yet by understanding that it's not a compliance issue. You get a radically different approach from all the professionals I deal with. They just shift their way of thinking, and then it taps into their better nature. I like to think that basically people are good and they're going to do the right thing, but they have to feel like they're doing the right thing because they want to do the right thing, right? That they have motivations from within themselves to do the right thing. And in a lot of cases, it's just that, you know, they are more interested in a situation if they're not having to knock somebody out, but rather get to problem solve. I think that's why you went to medical school, some of the positions here, right? Because you liked problem solving. So it's one of the threads that keeps coming up, that just we have to find how to motivate people.
Right. So we'll go to Stacy next, but
Yeah,
just,
Stacy. Yep, go
my
ahead.
sense, John and Caren, I think that was just a call to action for the two of you. You guys need to do something with law enforcement officers who get it, to create another film, another snippet, or whatever it is that can be used to educate and work with other members in the law enforcement community. All right, John, you're on mute.
We've been talking about doing exactly that, like taking that section of the film and expanding it, because there's a lot of material we left out of every section, and bringing it to law enforcement. And the really interesting thing is that 2 or 3 of the people we've met at police departments around the country who are leading their departments through a kind of education program about autism are parents of autistic kids. They're cops who have autistic kids, and they get it. And as Monica's saying, they're the best ones to get their colleagues on board, as opposed to, you know, some literal civilian coming in and talking to them. But I agree, Kong, that is a call to action.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of our biggies. And in some ways it's the easiest, because they know they need to kind of work this out, that this is a problem.
And I'll just jump in here. They're not on the call tonight, but the ARC national program they have a national and regional programs for direct services and advocacy, and they have something called Pathways, which is a training program for local municipalities and police departments. And I'm sure, like the Special Olympics, they'd be incredibly welcome to the movie as part of that curriculum, which our family supports. So and we're partnered with them on many different advocacy programs. So we'll introduce you to them. Just popped into my head. And Stacy,
Stacy and then Craig. Stacy first and then Craig.
Thank you. Yep, go ahead, Stacy.
Hi, John and Caren. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, thank you for that.
First of all, thank you for bringing this beautiful story to life. I have shared it widely. My son has severe intellectual and developmental disabilities. He's nonverbal, non-ambulatory. He functions at a 6-month level. We have to do everything for him. And soon I will have to jump to get him ready for bed. I'm in Pittsburgh. So this obviously touched my heart. And like I said, I've shared with so many of my friends with children with disabilities and on the spectrum. So I have 2 questions, and take them for what they're worth, but this is my process and how I think. Number 1 is, if you could really blue sky as to like your ultimate goal or what you would want to accomplish, maybe a celebrity you'd want to engage, an org you'd want to engage, if you had to really just go out there and say, we would love to do X, or this is our ultimate goal, what would that be? That's number 1. And then number 2, do you at all have a social media strategy to promote the movie? I'm an influencer in the digital health community. I do a lot there. I'm very active on Twitter. I don't have that 100,000 person following. And I always say I'm nobody, but I'm connected to the somebodies. And I'm on a number of platforms. I'm fairly well known and would be happy to share if you did have a social media strategy in place that you'd want to execute. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
So the social media question, we've just gotten our website together, which has our trailer on it, and we have not hit the social media angle of things yet. Part of that is confirming who our distributor is, because we think once we do that, that's kind of where we can kind of lead everybody to. And in the meanwhile, then, once we have the platform, we can be able to push that out. We know that we're going to be doing a podcast with iHeartRadio, or we're in the process of working on it, but we don't have a deal yet, but they're working on it already. And it's mostly going to focus on Donald, but it's also going to be a great mouthpiece for the film and getting people engaged. And so we're really excited about that. And we're working with them. We're going to be the voices in the podcast that help tell the story.
I would also, though, confess, Stacy, that
we could use
we don't know what we're doing when it comes to social media in its more complex, esoteric sense.
Neither do I.
Okay. So it kind of
in its most complex. Come on, John.
The world sort of scares me. I just feel like you never know what's going to happen or how things are going to get twisted or turned. But we would love some advice if you have, can give us some insight on it. And if you don't have time for that, that's totally okay. Also, I wasn't sure if you were curious or if you were volunteering, but we have a long way to go in figuring that out. So we have some of the pieces in place. The blue sky question. Wow, Caren, you're again, Karen's always the dreamer of things that are never going to happen and then turn out to happen because she believes in them. For example, Wynton Marsalis scoring the movie music for us. He has a brother with autism, and Caren knew that and said, he might want to be part of this project. And I said, there's just no way. I mean, he's too busy. And she said, well, let me write him an email. 4 days later, he wrote back to her email saying, yeah, I'll score your movie for you. And he did. And it was one of the most exciting days was to go in and watch him record with musicians. So I'll let you take the blue sky question, Caren. What would be the dream come true for distribution or impact?
I could tell you what the ultimate goal is. I'm not sure that I can answer how to do it, which is, I want to change the world. I want people everywhere to have a better understanding of autism, because I believe that it will change people. And that I'm not pie in the sky, airy fairy that just, oh, if we just all understand, everything will be great. But the medical profession, and universities and educators, if just those places change because of knowledge and awareness, the world starts to change. Any of these pockets of communities that we can change by sharing this film, and like John said, we're gonna focus in. We're gonna make for police. We're gonna have a special sort of target pieces of things that we'll put together. But at the end of the day, I think that the whole of the movie is important, because it shows the whole of the spectrum. And I was very, very committed to showing people with more severe disabilities in this film, because I feel that they don't have a voice. And and it sounds cliche, but it's so true that the people that can't speak are the ones that are not heard. And that was a really, really important message that I wanted people to know, that this is the spectrum. These are people. This is autism. And the people that can speak for themselves, the spectrum is so large that they, I believe there are autisms, and it's not just one thing. And the point of saying that is just for people to understand how huge it is. And
Yeah. I'm also thinking on the blue sky question, like in terms of what would be like the dream come true, because you mentioned celebrity, something like that. If Jon Stewart's show was still on and he was really interested in autism and supporting autism causes, if we got a shot on Jon Stewart's show back then, or Colbert's show now, just to talk to the nation about it. And then if there's a consequence of that, if word just spread, word of mouth just spread that this is that it's an interesting movie, that it's an interesting watch. It's not, we don't want it to be a niche movie. So Big Sky, it's not a niche movie. It's a general movie. It's, it might run in some movie theaters. We dare not dream of the Oscars, but we felt that way about our book, and our book ended up being a Pulitzer Prize finalist. But,
John, I want to jump in a little bit here. Stacey Alexander, who's a board member and a mother of an affected daughter, has a question, but I'll just put a pin in this. And I'm really embarrassed to admit this, but I'm a TikToker. I am a simply consumer of TikTok, but I mean, it was simply because by the middle of the winter, all of the shows that I liked, which might be highbrow, didn't have the next series. And so I just sort of ended up on TikTok, and there is a really large autism TikTok group. And they are often the siblings of autistic and IDD individuals, and they're just fantastic. I can't say enough about how talented and caring this group is. So I think let's put a pin in that, and maybe
that's interesting.
We can talk about that. I mean, I only know because I follow them, and I've curated a list, but let's put a pin in that as well. But let me sort of turn, and I'm trumping Kung here to say that maybe Stacey could be our last of the audience, but Kung, do you want to go?
Yes,
and Craig. Craig.
Okay. Craig is up next.
Oh,
Stacey
sorry,
will
Craig.
bring us home. But I will apologize to the group. My son just came down asking for dinner. He's reminding us we're very late for dinner, and then reminding us tomorrow is his graduation. So he has from high school. So he has to. Right?
Oh my God!
And so let me please.
Yeah.
I will hand over my MC responsibilities for Mai.
Yeah.
Good. You can't just drink wine.
So Craig, I know you've been very, very patient. So Craig, you're
and
up
Stacey,
next.
and then Stacey.
Stacey.
Okay,
and then Mai will bring us home.
Mai will bring us home. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm very honored and just very happy to be a part of this group. I just wanted to touch on a few different things I heard, so it'll be a little rambly, including some things in the comments. First of all, I spent my clinical career as a family physician providing healthcare for people with disabilities in the state of Mississippi, and did not know that the first person with autism who was diagnosed with autism was from Mississippi. I worked for the Department of Mental Health there for over 20 years, so that's kind of interesting. But that just follows very closely with a lot of things I didn't know, which is my motivation to do what I do. When I started in this field, it was very, very obvious to me that I was not trained to provide healthcare for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Yet I was responsible for providing healthcare for 300 plus people with severe and profound levels of disabilities who did not communicate using words, who had very complex medical conditions. And I felt very incompetent. And that is a situation that I think many clinicians find themselves. And sometimes feeling incompetent and not knowing what to do comes across as insensitivity and anger and frustration and disappointment and blaming others, which is very unfortunate. The other response to that is to learn everything that you can, and then to take that and to try to teach people and teach others about providing healthcare for people with disabilities. And that's what I tried to do throughout my career. Is I tried to take all of these things that I learned the hard way, that I learned from direct support professionals, from nurses, from family members, from people with disabilities themselves, about meeting their healthcare needs better, and provide training and education to clinicians. So I no longer work for the Department of Mental Health in Mississippi. I retired from that position, but I now work for a company whose primary goal is to provide training and tools to help support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It's really for supporters. So our audience is direct support professionals, nurses, physicians who work in this field. To touch on one other thing I saw one other thing I heard about, police like to learn from police. Well, that same thing is very, very true in the healthcare world. And physicians really are going to only want to learn from other physicians, which is something that we need to consider as we move forward with whatever we do as a group. But in particular with this film, I'm pretty involved with the American Academy of Developmental Medicine and Dentistry. In fact, that's the reason I was late, because I was doing a presentation at their conference that ended at 7:30. And that, I think, would be another opportunity for you to consider next year. The AADMD conference is always held whenever the Special Olympics Games are held. It's held at the same city, so it'll be in Orlando at the same time next year. And that may be another opportunity to present this to physicians. Now, it'll be physicians and clinicians who know this field and work in this field, but they certainly can reach out to other physicians about this movie. So it's something else to consider. So just a few kind of random points there, but I just wanted to thank everybody again for being here and for the mission of this group.
That's great. That's really helpful too.
Hi, I'm the other Stacy, since there are two of us.
Oh, a double Stacy situation. Very rare.
Yeah, this a beautiful trailer. I can't wait to see the film. And my daughter is 16, is nonverbal too. So I really appreciate your remarks, Caren, about giving voice to the needs they have. I think it's really important for employers to really see this. They're trying to figure out how to support their workforce, and they're also looking at the future of work and potential workers. And so this issue of inclusion and how we really support the needs of the folks who are the loved ones of folks with autism, but also how they can really be more sensitive and understand how their potential employees who may have autism and developmental disabilities, they're trying to figure that out. And most of these companies have employee resource groups who really focus on these issues. And so it's, they would be very amped to screen/sponsor something like this. And then in my day job, I work for AARP, and a lot of people forget that people that we love age. They think they're perpetual children. And
Yeah.
so there needs to be more focus about lifespan and life course for the people that we love who are affected. And I think there is room to reach not just like an AARP, but other national aging organizations who really, try to figure out how to navigate age and disability without, solely linking them. So I think there's room to talk to other national organizations on that as well.
That's a great idea. We had not thought about that at all.
Right,
And
right.
totally makes sense. Thank you for that idea.
I'm glad they're recording this because there's so many things that we're learning. It's great. Thank you, everybody.
We will, Caren and John, will coalesce everything, all the suggestions that have been made afterwards, and share those with you. And I think we'll also connect you directly with the folks on this call, if that's okay with everyone, so that if you want to dig a little bit deeper, if you need any help forming specific connections, of course, IEC can also help with that too. We'll try to make it as easy as possible for you.
Thank you so much.
So I want to bring us home. And I think that this is already evident, self-evident based on the conversation, but I just want to have it land with you. The healthcare equivalent of the world that Don experienced doesn't exist. That's the world we want to build. And we know what we have to do that, to make that happen. We have to change culture. We have to train clinicians, help them feel competent. We have to pay them. We have to connect them to community supports and hold them accountable for doing better and doing well at it. And we know how the pieces fit together. And about those other conversations that we touched on about equity and social justice, as we said before, a healthcare world that is safer for the most vulnerable among us, which this population just so quintessentially represents, is a safer world in terms of health and healthcare for all of us. Because at some point in our lives, we're all going to be disabled. We're all going to need help and support. And what kind of healthcare person or healthcare support do you want? Or, I know we're speaking to the choir here, but we want to arm you with all those rhetorical tools to take back to your home communities. So in terms of action steps, we want to make sure that people feel now are energized and that you have a place to put those energies. For sure, thank you so much for all the fabulous suggestions on how to promote this movie and how to really not just promote it, but to use it. That's what we want to do, is we want to use this movie. So again, we'll collate those suggestions. If you have others, or if you have direct connections you want to offer John and Caren, please let me and Sam know, and we'll make that happen. Please also support IEC in our work. We're really bad at social media right now, getting better at it. But I'll tell you that, those of you who came on the call early heard me say, we were on 4 different podiums this week, speaking to healthcare audiences. And for many of those audiences, it was the first time they were hearing this, because they're not the specialists who focus on IDD. They're the general audiences. And they weren't just clinicians. They were insurance executives. They were hospital leaders. They were policymakers. Even policymakers don't think about this. I was a policymaker. I didn't think about it. And so that's what we're trying to do. So we would, and then for those of you who are in healthcare or who want to touch healthcare, we would love to engage you in our actual projects. We have really cool projects, both in process and in design phase, where you can leave all kinds of fingerprints on it, and would love to engage your organizations. So with that, I would like to add my thanks to John and Caren for their generosity of spirit and for the work that they did in putting together this beautiful piece of, I don't know what the right word is, this beautiful bridge of a movie. And I want to thank Guang and Absentia for making this happen, for IEC, and putting us in touch. I want to thank all of you, not only for coming, but because you arrived here because you touched our world. you gave us hope through your partnership, through your support, through just your willingness to listen and hear our case and help us make it better. So with all that, feel free to finish the bottle of wine all by yourself, and best of luck to all of us.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for making us a part of this. It's a very special
Totally.
group of people to be talking to and feel like we're part of. So it really means a lot to both John and I.
We'd like to
Thanks.
stay connected.
This won't be the end. We will find other reasons to bring you all back.
Good. Thank you.
Same
We want to come back.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Night.